Now, just as we saw when we looked at the law of demand, that consumers are sensitive or responsive to a change in price, leading to different elasticities of demand, the same thing can happen to producers. They are also sensitive to or responsive to changes in price. So we know, based on the law of supply, that when the price rises, the quantity supplied also rises, and when the price falls, the quantity supplied also falls. But we don't yet have the answer to the question, how much does it rise? Does it rise by a lot or a little? Does it fall by a lot or a little? Elasticity, again, answers the question, how much? So now we turn our attention to elasticity of supply. The elasticity of supply, as we see right here, measures how responsive firms are to price changes. Specifically, the elasticity of supply is the percentage change in the quantity supplied divided by the percentage change in the price. Now, sometimes the quantity supplied is not very sensitive to price changes. For example, if you have little else to do on a Friday night, you might be willing to supply about the same number of babysitting hours whether you are paid $7 an hour or $12 an hour. When the quantity supplied changes by a smaller percentage than the price, the elasticity of supply is less than 1, and we say that the supply is considered to be inelastic. This first panel, panel A, shows a hypothetical inelastic supply curve for pizza. A 50% rise in the price from $10 to $15 causes only a 25% rise in the quantity supplied from 100 to 125. The elasticity of supply for this price change is then 25% divided by 50%, which would equal 0.5. And that would be the elasticity of supply. Now that value is less than 1, so pizza supply in this case is inelastic. The most extreme case of inelastic supply is a vertical supply curve, which has a supply elasticity equal to 0, and we say that that is perfectly inelastic. Perfectly inelastic in that case. Now, for many goods, the quantity supplied is so sensitive to price changes that it changes by a larger percentage than the price. In these cases, the elasticity of supply is greater than 1. And when that is true, we say that the supply is elastic. Elastic supply is illustrated in panel B. Along that supply curve, the same 50% rise in price from $10 to $15 causes the quantity supplied to rise from 100 to 200, or by 100%. The elasticity of supply here is therefore 100% divided by 50%, which would equal 2.0. 2.0. That number is greater than 1, so supply is considered elastic. Now, the most extreme case of elastic supply is a horizontal supply curve, which we say has infinite elasticity, and therefore it's described as perfectly elastic. If the quantity supplied is moderately sensitive to price changes, such that the percentage change in the quantity supplied is the same as the percentage change in the price, the elasticity of supply is equal to 1. And that is when we call supply unit elastic. Panel C of this figure illustrates unit elastic supply. Here, the 50% rise in price from $10 to $15 now causes a 50% rise in the quantity from 100 to 150. So the elasticity of supply in panel C is 50% divided by 50%, which equals 1.0. So supply is unit elastic. So the question is, well, what determines the elasticity of supply? In large part, It depends on how costly it is for firms to increase production. That's the first one. When it is difficult or expensive to make more of something, even a large price increase will not cause the quantity supplied to increase by very much. The supply of gold, for example, is inelastic because it is very costly for firms to find and extract more gold. If the price of gold rises by 10%, the quantity of gold supplied will rise by less than 10%. In contrast, the supply of t-shirts is elastic because it is cheap and easy to produce more t-shirts. Firms in countries around the world, including India, Sri Lanka, Mexico, Turkey, and China, have the equipment needed to produce t-shirts by the truckload. They also have plenty of cotton, the key input for making t-shirts. Firms in these countries would increase production substantially in response to even a small rise in price. If the price of t-shirts rose by 10%, the number of t-shirts supplied to the market would rise by much more than 10%. Time is another factor that determines the elasticity of supply. When the price of a good rises, firms can increase their production by more after they have time to adjust their production facilities. For example, suppose the price of running shoes increases. Over time, firms that make running shoes can expand their factories and install new assembly lines to increase their production. But factory space and assembly lines cannot be adjusted overnight. So, we generally expect supply to become more elastic as more time passes after the price changes. This figure right here summarizes the influences on supply elasticity. You can see that if there's a short time horizon and additional output is much more costly to produce it, the supply elasticity will be less than 1 and supply will be inelastic. But if there's a long time horizon and or additional output is not much more costly to produce, then supply elasticity will be greater than 1 and we will have elastic supply. Finally, this table right here summarizes the various types of elasticity of supply. The first column shows you the type of supply, whether it's elastic, unit elastic, or inelastic. The second column shows you what that actually means. The third column gives you some examples of goods that have elastic, unit elastic, and inelastic supply. The fourth column tells you what the value of elasticity has to be with the elasticity coefficient. And finally, the last column tells you why elasticity has that value, based on the formula for the elasticity of supply.